Well, our next panel, honestly, I feel like it needs no introduction. So I hope you'll just join me in welcoming to the stage Alison Skilbeck, Betsy Brantley, Michael Carter, and Matthew Solon. Well,
how do you guys feel?
Yeah, I mean,
Very
can you believe
impressed.
it's been 40 years? You were all there at the beginning. I mean, when this show came out, when it started, did you have any idea that it was going to turn into kind of a worldwide phenomenon? I mean, was there a clue in your minds that that was the case?
I'm blessed with extraordinary prescience.
Excellent.
I just knew on day one it's going to be global, and here we are. I don't know what you guys felt, but you walked on that set for the first time, and you did get that sense of something special. As we were saying, part of that was the good old Granada days of being looked after. But
Absolutely.
just seeing Jeremy in his costume for the first time and going on to that here, the real version of that, no, I absolutely felt this was something very special.
Yeah. Well, Michael, you were there at the very first episode that aired, Scandal in Bohemia. I mean, you know, that episode introduced a new Sherlock Holmes to the world, and there had been quite a few, but this was the premiere of a brand new one. I mean, any pressure? I mean, were you guys feeling like we got to get this all just right, or was it?
No, I think that I mean, among the regulars like Jeremy and David, there's always that feeling that actors have they're pleased to be in work and they hope it's going to run and run and run. I mean, I've been in so many series where we thought this is going to run, and you know, you're unemployed 3 months later. So there's always that sort of horror waiting in the wings. But I mean, it was clearly a high-level production, and Jeremy was somebody who had a substantial career as a very young man in the theatre. Then had gone to America. He wanted to be a Hollywood, you know, he wanted to be the new Cary Grant or the new Gary Cooper, and it just didn't work out for him. He actually ended up touring a stage play of Sherlock Holmes, can you believe it, for years. You probably all know this, you probably know more about it than I do. So he was back doing this, and you know, he was hoping that this would, I suppose, get him a foot in the British ladder again to some degree. But it was pretty clear. I mean, Gail Honeycutt was in it. You know, it was a big production. There was a lot of faith in it. There was a lot of money being put into it and kind of top people working on it. So it was a good thing to be in.
Well, I wanted to ask you about Gail. I mean, obviously, we lost her just recently. But your scenes were all with her. Tell us a little bit about Gail Honeycutt.
Well, she was great. She was just very professional. She knew an awful lot about the theatre. British theatre. She spoke about it quite a bit. She was very, very sweet, very professional, just really rather ordinary. You know, I mean, ordinary in the way that, you know, there wasn't any kind of flamboyant histrionics with her, star histrionics. She was just kind of one of the gang in a way.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and oddly though too, speaking of Scandal, I mean, your scenes were all with Jeremy in disguise, so you didn't get to be with Sherlock Holmes per se. You were with the disguised Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah, I was with the old bloke with the no teeth and the broken clay pipe.
Yeah.
I didn't see him in all his splendor, although he did look pretty splendid in rehearsals. He used to wear a bandana around his head, just to give it that kind of West Coast hippie touch.
Well, I wanted to ask you guys about that because back in the day, we heard it in the last panel, you know, rehearsal was actually a thing that existed. You guys had, in your early episodes, was it 2 weeks of rehearsal? Is that about what it was?
Well, we certainly had plenty. I remember we went down to Brixton. We had quite a bit of rehearsals, yeah.
Yeah.
Thing of the past, gone forever. Yeah.
What were those sessions like, though? I mean, for those of us who, you know, would like to have been a fly on those walls, I mean, what was rehearsal like? Was it a table read? Were you blocking? Were you having fun? What was it like?
Yeah, blocking and having fun and lots of chat off and knowing that, you know, the thing about in those days when you rehearse for a tell, you have bits of tape on the floor marking out the room you were in or whatever. You knew that once you got in front of the cameras, it was going to be completely different anyway. So you were just sort of kind of going through the ropes, really, in a sense, I think trying to find some sense of a character really in the relationships more than blocking it. You know, the directors would let you, the director, Paul Annett, wasn't worried about the blocking. I mean, he wasn't kind of going in front of us like, this is what they used to do. This is the lens.
Right.
So they'd be, going up and down like this. You'd be following the lens. That didn't happen. He just kind of let you get on with it.
Well, and Alison, I mean, rehearsal or not, your blocking would have been pretty simple. I mean, you were sitting down with somebody in your lap.
I was mainly sitting down
Yeah.
with David Gwillim's head on my lap,
Yeah.
which was fine, which was lovely. No, but I just remember a feeling of having time. I don't know what it was. We seemed to have time then. And I know my rehearsal was well over a week in Kennington, and there was just that feeling of getting to know Jeremy. But, you entered the room, and there was Jeremy, and there was a feeling of heightened energy and heightened care. And I must say as well, tribute to Conan Doyle, I mean, Jeremy was so hot on doing the stories as they were written and embodying the pictures. And he was completely committed to that, and it was wonderful to see it. But it was that feeling of heightened energy, heightened care. You immediately felt taken care of, and by Granada as well. I mean, arriving in Manchester, you're practically met at the station with someone saying, "Please take this money," in a brown envelope. It was wonderful. One was sort of paid to breathe, really. It was terribly nice.
I think we spoke about it a little bit, but the rose scene, it's speaking of like trying to emulate the Paget illustrations, like how much more difficult, how much more time was put into making those moments special?
I think Jeremy made sure, I see in retrospect that he made sure that happened. Actually, I mean, I've only really just caught up with a lot of the episodes, thanks to you all. And it's absolutely mesmerising. We watch about one a night, and my husband's completely hooked. But the rose bit, I watched it again yesterday, knowing that came out of sort of nowhere. We have much to learn from the flowers. And there's something quite sort of dropped in about it, and everyone goes, "Oh, right on,"
Yeah.
but I mean, it's
I think you go right on.
it's kind of there. Yes.
Jeremy loved
Excuse
it,
me,
though.
Mr. Holmes.
Yeah, it was cut out of the script originally, and Jeremy had it put back in because he loved it so much. Yeah,
Yes.
it's different. I mean, Betsy, you were in the second episode, and again, no scenes with Jeremy Brett. What was that like? I mean, you were the leading lady in one of the most popular Sherlock Holmes stories of all time, and you didn't get to spend any time with the great detective. I mean, what was it like on set? I mean, was Jeremy there? I mean, was he cheering you on from the sidelines? Was he contributing? What was it like?
It was when you told me that I hadn't had any scenes with him that I realized I hadn't had any scenes with him. Because he was always there, and in rehearsal, you walked in, and I've never seen anyone so focused. He just zoomed in.
Yeah.
And I think that he's working every single moment in rehearsal, and every single moment that he's filming, he's just finding more and more and more, which kept it alive for all those years. And he was extraordinarily kind. He was, because I was young, he was that kind of actor that I thought, oh, that's what actors are like. And we'd all go have meals together, and we were always hanging out, and I just thought, yeah, this is the way it's supposed to be.
I wanted to ask you about that, though.
Well, did he ever sing for you?
No.
Oh.
No.
You said when we spoke before that Jeremy was the kind of actor that made you want to get into the profession. And I never got to follow up, but what did you mean exactly by that?
Well, I grew up in North Carolina, and so we had anything to do with acting, and when I went to University of North Carolina, went to London, and then was in Stratford-on-Avon doing, it was a graduate school, summer school from Shakespeare, and auditioned on a whim at Central School and got in. And so I really didn't have any experience with any sort of association other than it was fun, which is not a bad reason to choose a job if you can. So I had this image in my fantasy life of what an actor was. So he fit that because he made life a stage.
Right.
And I thought, that means you're living every moment. Yeah?
Yeah. Well, and kind of the opposite spectrum of Jeremy or Sherlock Holmes in the show is the very unhappy John Hector McFarlane.
How unhappy were you?
I always got those kind of parts. I was either a slightly goofy Englishman or a rather troubled, worried one. And they stay with me all these years. But I just want to, on the things we've been talking about. So on that set, and it was a luxury having rehearsal, which is brilliant. But I'm a young actor of 28 or something then. You're with these incredibly talented people. One of the notes I read about the character, John Hector McFarlane, he's got asthma, which of course Sherlock spots in a second. So on the first rehearsal, I'm doing my best asthma acting. It was moving, it was fantastic, it was clinically sound. And I could tell that Jeremy was thinking, probably that's not quite what we're looking for. But one of the annoying things that actors do is give each other notes. I hate that. But he would never ever do that. But I could tell he wasn't entirely happy. So Ken came up to me and said, Matthew, could I just have a word? That's a lot of asthma. So I learned.
Yeah.
Because you're working with those guys, they are so subtle. And you see Jeremy sitting in one of those chairs and just a lift of an eyebrow and tiny little moors, so sort of minimalist but so powerful. And that was a huge lesson to learn from that experience.
But those subtleties, I mean, on other shows, would you have gotten the chance to perform those subtleties? Because there's a lot of tight shots, there's a lot of moments for things to breathe, and other shows I feel like of the time you didn't have those opportunities. So would you have been right on a different show?
No, I think the luxury of having a proper rehearsal where you can try things, excuse me, and build up some trust with your fellow actors. So on the day, and as you say, it's always different when you get there. But if you've got that support, you feel you've had that support behind you and that trust, it's a hugely powerful. And to go on set for the first time, there's your mark, go. Yeah. I hate that.
Well, in the original script too, I think for that episode, there was a scene where you were actually supposed to accompany Jeremy Brett, Sherlock Holmes, and Watson to the crime scene for the denouement, but it was cut. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So, excuse me. I mean, Jeremy was passionate, as has been said, about accuracy and fidelity to Conan Doyle and to the stories. And I could hear, I was in for rehearsal, and this is a spoiler alert because there is a denouement at the end of The Norwood Builder when the confrontation with the evil Jonathan Oldacre. And I heard these guys talking, and David Burt's got his back to me. They'd also been discussing this, that this wasn't in the script. It wouldn't have happened, if I'd been incarcerated in prison as the prime suspect. They wouldn't let me out to see this. And I just heard David Burke saying, we better tell the lad. No, I treasure this. It's the last time I was ever called lad. And now I'm 69, but so it's a happy memory. So the other side is I'd already worked out my reaction shots, so that's a missed opportunity to do some of the best reaction shots ever seen on TV.
Yeah. Well, speaking of reaction shots, there's a relatively famous photo. I think most of the people in this room know about it. It's this one here, and we have two of the ladies on this couch right now, and tell us about this picture. I mean, how did this? What's the story behind this? How did this come about?
This was the launch, wasn't it? Which is the last time I saw Betsy. It was the launch of the entire series, wasn't it? And I remember talking to you about that wonderful film that she was in, 5 Days, One Summer. Mm-hmm. She was wonderful in it.
They're too young.
They're too young. With Sean Connery, try and get it. But it was the occasion of the launch, and we were the ladies. Do
you remember? I remember. Never always trust that now, but I remember him gathering us.
Yes.
He was like, I want my girls.
That's right. That's
and
right.
You sit here, and you sit here.
Yeah, it was all stage managed. It was lovely.
Yeah.
Because it was a great occasion.
Was it a premiere? Was it you were watching the episodes, or was it just a press gathering?
It was press conference.
Yes.
Okay.
And it was in London, and it was because everything was made in Manchester, so it was. It was way after Dancing Men had been done. It was wonderful to meet everybody.
If you could expand this image, you'd see Michael is right off to the side. I'm just kidding. That's not true. We spoke to Allison recently, and we'll be airing that fairly soon. But there's a great thing. I want to ask you all this because she shared with us that she actually did quite a bit of character creation. She took the time to look at the character and write her own backstory for the character. And I don't know if that's a totally common thing or if some of you just go right off the script page. but Allison happens to have her notes from from 1983,
All
84.
handwritten.
And I thought maybe you could just read us just that little character description that you wrote.
You have very beautiful handwriting.
Once I had beautiful handwriting. I made these notes about the character. I'll just skate through one. 30 years old, of striking appearance and strong personality, quite evident even upon a first meeting. Daughter of a Northumberland ironmaster, so not born to the ruling class to which she now belongs. I mean, it goes on like that. And well educated. What book is she reading? I haven't even decided what book she might read. But maybe you want me to skip. Do you want me to skip to the end of it?
There's one other piece I'd like you to read, if you wouldn't mind. So
Yeah.
another thing Allison did was, if you guys remember at the end of the episode, Percy gets the treaty back, and he's very excited, but he has to go down and let her know that her brother is the criminal. So the episode ends with him. She's looking very happy that Percy's and they all come together so happy, and then faces drop and freeze frame.
Yeah.
But Allison was actually prepared because there was no dialogue written in that moment. So she actually wrote a little bit of her own dialogue just in case that might happen. So she can share a little bit of that with us.
I'm already suspecting Joseph. I've got Holmes's note, done some working out. Then I see Percy. Remember, this takes about 2 seconds. So it's all rather concentrated. I see Percy, mingled joy at the sight of him, and so sure of himself. Then I see his face. Darling, it's okay. I've got the treaty, but there's something bad you must know. That's Percy's line, obviously. And then I say, inside, I think I know, Percy. It was Joseph, wasn't it? Yes. It's all right. I'm all right. I half guessed. The main thing is that you're all right. God, he could have killed you. My own brother. Oh, Percy, don't, dearest.
It's a whole nother series.
I can play all the parts. I can do the lot. And that's it. Whatever he's done, we're together. Your honour is clear, and we're together. So all that was going on, and I'm dressed in lilac. I mean, that's it.
Yeah. That's wonderful. I thought it was so neat that you still have. Oh my God, you still have that. It's so amazing. It's so wonderful.
And the script.
The script.
Oh, and the script is in there too. Yeah. We have to
see it
talk
later.
about that later if you don't mind. We've heard so many stories about Jeremy and how he was, he was unique in the sense that he really was a leader of a troupe. It wasn't. This show was like a theater company in a sense. Was it that way early on? Was it that way in that first year? Did you get the sense of that, or was he still finding that? What do you think, Betsy?
I think that he, as I said, he personified everything I thought an actor would be, which was also the camaraderie. So it was like Pinocchio with an actress life for me. And it was therefore relaxing for everybody.
Yeah. I mean, did you get that sense, Michael? What was it?
Yeah, I did feel. I mean, most of us were fairly well experienced in the theatre, so it did have a kind of an attitude, which was sort of theatrical in the sense that it was a company that was working together. I mean, we were coming and going. They were the constants, David and Jeremy. It's very different now. I mean, it's very different to how it is now. Completely different. Even the actors are different. They come through a completely different way now. So yeah, it was, and I think that the production itself was sort of looking for a style, which it found, and it established, and it was a good style. And it sort of slotted in. I mean, being in the very first one, those were just ideas at that time. But
Can I? Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't. No, I just on this conversation about the family thing, that to remember it was Jeremy and David that were part of that welcome, because they were such different people, physically different, their way of working was different, the sense of humour was different, but I thought they had a fantastic kind of chemistry, and they both got that thing of, let's embrace these people who come for an episode and disappear.
Yeah, I'm really happy to hear that. We all love Jeremy so much, but it's wonderful to talk to, especially this group, because you guys were with David. You were with David Burke, and there were more episodes done later with Edward, which is wonderful. They're all wonderful as well. But we love David. We love David Burke, and I don't know. We could talk about Jeremy all day, and we will, but let's talk about David Burke for a minute. I mean,
We need to hear some stories about David Burke.
What he brought, I thought, of the many things he brought to it was a kind of masculinity.
Yeah.
Because in the past, Watson had been played as this sort of idiotic buffer who didn't know stuff, but he was this man with a history. He was a doctor. He'd had war experience, and he brought that sense of presence, very different presence to Jeremy.
Which would make him ground
Yeah.
what Jeremy was doing.
Yeah.
And it also gives this wonderful dramatic tension, which
Yeah.
is just absolutely core.
Yeah.
And I think represents the story so well.
And if you could see them, Jeremy, standing by the window looking out eagle-like onto the streets, and then dear David reading a newspaper in a chair here, and it was totally credible that they spend time together in life, in real life.
yeah.
No, he's a lovely guy.
Wonderful. Yeah.
It was also a thing of pace as well, because, I mean, Jeremy is so mercurial and so fast-thinking and fast-speaking. And David had a kind of deliberation and a slow pace, which he kept to. But there was also something quite, which is wonderful, I think, in any actor, a kind of childlike thing about him,
Yeah.
which doesn't necessarily jar with what you've said.
No.
But there was something about him which was so absolutely in the moment. And I mean, when we worked with them, they'd only been together as a partnership for quite a short time. So it's extraordinary they created that feeling of partnership and of welcome to us, which
I think
which was lovely.
you both, like, that's exactly... Yes, the manliness, and yes, the boyishness. I don't know
Yes.
how he did it, but he did
Yes.
both.
We also
You
heard
know?
you could be quite mischievous, and I
Yeah,
wondered
yeah.
how that would crop up.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
But little
Yes.
moments of kindness. So when I first appear on set, the unfortunate John Hector MacFarlane, and Sherlock goes, I know who you are. You've got asthma. You live in Southeast London. You're an accountant. You're a solicitor. And I go, huh? And then Dave goes, well, he explains it. Well, because you've got those papers, and you've got, and he just very kindly explains what's. Oh, thank you. But that was just a little moment of that, how that works so beautifully.
Yeah, yeah. Did you get to interact with David Burke at all?
Yeah, I did good. Yeah, I didn't appear in any scenes with him, but I remember the rehearsal period. I mean, I just kind of back up what's been said so far. I think one of the things about David is that he gave a kind of quiet centre to the piece, and that allowed Jeremy to kind of go off and do his rather kind of eccentric parabolas of characterization. And he was picked for that. It was ideal casting. I mean, I'd seen David quite a lot in the theatre, and he tended to play these rather kind of solid, sensible people. Lovely bloke. I mean, very funny, very, very funny. He just discovered photography at the time, and I was a photographer. So we spent our time talking about photography and talking about lenses and things like that, and film speed. That was my entire conversation with him. But I thought he was great, and I was very disappointed he left. He left for a very specific reason. I can't remember. I seem to think his wife was ill or something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
He just had a son
Tom.
named Tom.
Yeah, it was a shame. He was very good. I mean, I thought that his successor was very good too. But David was he was a really nice man. He came. I met him in the theatre one night. We both went to see a show in Hammersmith about 30 years later. We met in the bar afterwards and recognised each other. And it was just as if we'd been working the previous week. We're just chatting away, and he met my wife, and he was telling her funny stories and all that sort of thing. He's just a lovely bloke.
Do you remember how did the part come your way for Scandal in Bohemia?
Well, I'd been in a show in the West End that got me a lot of attention, and then Paul Annett had cast me in, I think it was a London Weekend thing, playing a villain in some thriller. I was absolutely appalling. And I looked ridiculous. I was dressed in black leather. I looked like some kind of weirdo. I think to make it up to me, he offered me the part in the first episode of Scandal in Bohemia. So it was great. I mean, I didn't even audition or interview for the part, and I just got it, and then away we went.
You weren't quite a villain, but I mean, what kind of direction would he have given you in terms of your
Sorry,
character? I said you weren't quite a villain in Scandal, but what kind of direction would have he given you in terms of you? Because you're quite strong. And,
Well, he said the only things he said to me was the character. He's very anxious. He wants to get this whole thing sorted, and he wants to get out of there before the King of Bohemia appears on the scene. So he's just impatient. He just wants it done. Come on, come on, come on. So that's really the line I took, and that was it. So I just played him very kind of impatient and snapping away at this weirdo in the church and demanding he be the witness, etc., etc. That was it. It was very simple.
Well, again, we've spoken to so many people from so many years on the show, and we have heard a lot of stories, a lot of fun stories about rap parties and everybody going out after the movie or after this film was shot and having a great time, and Jeremy getting up on tables and singing and dancing. I don't know, any such stories any of you would like to share? Any rabble rousing with the cast and crew afterwards?
I seem to remember we went to a Chinese restaurant in Manchester. And it did end up with dancing, but there were quite a few of us. I think there was Jeremy and me, and I can't quite remember, but it was really lovely and energetic, and God knows. I mean, it was lovely. There's a feeling of celebration throughout.
Mm.
Super, yeah.
I had my boyfriend with me, and I don't think he really wanted to do that. What we experienced was very tame. But you could see he could. Yeah.
But Betsy, how much interaction did you have with David?
Oh, it's funny because the way the scenes would be set up, we were often sitting in chairs together a lot. And he kind of reminded me of, at the time, my uncle. He was the foundation. He was this solid person who just oozed kindness and reality. Mm. Yeah. Yeah, it was a special cast, and I didn't know television very much at that point. So I had done theater and a couple of films, and I didn't know that it wasn't normal to have that family atmosphere because of theater, which I hope still has that.
We spoke yesterday briefly, and we were talking about images of you from the show, and mm-hmm. and how it's difficult to find an image of you where you weren't gripping your head, like. I mean, yeah, but I mean, how did that manifest? Like, how did you feel on set? How did you get through those days like that?
That's actually a good part of it, because I'm not going to go party when I'm going to go the next day. So I was relatively quiet, but I'm not really method, but you don't want to go so far in one direction that you have to pull yourself way back. So it was very calm, and they were very supportive of that. I mean, I always felt like, for whatever reason, as we didn't have any scenes, Jeremy always was on the lookout to make sure I was okay. Yeah. I think he did that with everybody pretty much.
Yeah. That's nice. Did you guys have any interaction with Michael Cox, the producer?
Hardly.
Yeah, not so much.
I was the sort of actor that wouldn't, if they'd say, we're using this lens, I'd say, don't tell me, just show me the size of the shot, because I was too much. I didn't want any other person around, like someone like a producer. It's too pure.
But you actually, Betsy, had a great experience at Leighton Hall. I mean, you got to be friendly with the folks who ran Leighton Hall, and you're still friendly, yeah?
Susie Reynolds sends her love to everybody. It is a very, very particular atmosphere. She just gave me a little book that she wrote about life at Leighton Hall. This is where Dancing Men was filmed, up in Lancashire. And I love the title because it's Life in a Not Very Stately Home. And that's Susie to me.
That's wonderful.
I re-listened to the podcast when we were of your episode when we were prepping for this, and you spoke about the wig. And
yeah,
we could talk about the wig, but you also said it was nun's hair.
Yeah, well, it was traditionally
special?
At that point, I was told. I mean, it might be
Was there something special about nun's hair?
Well, they all had to cut them all off. They'd be
It was available.
It was available. So the wig was supposed to they did all these measures. Where's the place in London you always went to? This little.
I don't know.
Wig Creations.
No, it was a little low ceiling place Wig Creations. And does it still exist?
I expect so.
Oh, and they measured like you were going to get brain surgery, and then we go up to Lancashire, and there's no wig, and it's coming, and it's coming. And it's coming. And the day before, I presume, it came in. And so they had it that night. And I put it on the first day of shooting. And so she said, and I'm not sure how this works, that it was knotted backwards. So where the forehead would be, the hair was knotted this way. So it would fall this way instead of that way. Mm. And she did a miracle job. She cut little tendrils and sort of did things with it, and it worked fine. But yeah, wigs, hair stuff can be fun. I preferred wigs to when you get those things stuck on your scalp. Do you know what I mean? Extensions.
Yes,
yeah.
yes, wig anytime.
Were you wearing a wig?
Yes, I was.
Okay.
Yes. And I remember travelling in cars in it and it being sort of shoving backwards and having to be pulled forwards. I did actually, when I watched the Naval Treaty again in preparation for today, I got one tiny glimpse of the net and I thought, whoops.
Oh, no.
Hope no one notices.
Now we have something new to look for.
Yeah.
Can I?
Yep.
I just heard my.
But I think moustaches featured an incredible amount in the series. There are some very... There are moustaches with lives of their own.
Yeah, Matthew, did you have sideburns applied?
No, you were very sweet when you interviewed me and said in my opening shot when I'm troubled and I come to Baker Street, and the makeup has just arranged a nice little lock of hair just to break the sheer sort of rigidity of my short haircut. And you said, Matthew, how did you manage to get that bead of sweat just on that point on their hair? Now, this is ultimate method acting, isn't it? And I said, no, actually, it was glycerine. It was just a little blob of glycerine to give my sweat. Very well placed, very well placed. Secrets of the trade.
That's the kind of details we all appreciate. We're asking it for them.
I think, Michael, did you have facial hair? Did you have...
Well, I had a moustache, and I can't honestly remember if it was mine or if it was stuck on.
Artist own.
It's hard to know. Yeah. Well, we are running low on time, and before we go, I just want to ask, is there any one memory that we haven't talked about that just really stands out as the best of times for you on the show?
Can I do a life lesson, which I can honestly say I learned on that set, because you get there, and there are these incredibly talented people, and we're including that, you guys, everyone supporting the whole Granada family, and you kind of realize, do the best you can. Wherever you are, whatever's happening in your life, do the best you can. And that's a life lesson I took from that.
Wonderful.
I also, we spoke about this, but I mean, after the fact, we told you that you were working in Morrissey's house.
That's extraordinary.
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't Morrissey's house then.
It wasn't Morrissey's house then.
Yeah,
he definitely wasn't there at the time.
But maybe he was a fan. Maybe he was a fan of yours and he had to have that house.
Yeah.
Maybe that was it.
Michael, favorite memory?
Well, the thing I remember is kind of odd. It really, in some senses, had nothing to do with the production, but we were filming the scenes. Arnie's house, which was meant to be in St John's Wood in London, was actually filmed in Liverpool. And we filmed, it was a very beautiful house. It did look like St John's Wood, but it was owned by a very old lady, and it transpired that this old lady had never been beyond the front gate since about 1943, when her husband was killed in the war and left with 2 little children. And she'd brought up a family, and she'd suffered instant agoraphobia. She brought up a family, and they were married, and she had grandchildren. But she'd never been up, she had been confined within that house and the garden since the war, and she was there the whole time. She was in the back room, or she was out in the garden. She was lovely. I mean, she was just very funny and very charming. Jeremy was very incredibly sweet to her and made sure she was okay and all that. And I just remember that very strange, kind of adjunct to the production, which, as I said, had nothing at all to do with the show itself.
That's
but
neat.
It was strange.
We love to hear that stuff. Yeah. Alison, anything come to mind?
I'll be as brief as I can because it's 2 that have come to my
Please.
mind.
Yeah.
Jeremy in the garden of this beautiful house near Macclesfield, which was standing in for near Woking. And it was a scene where he's sitting under a tree, cross-legged in his pale suit, and just sort of semi-yoga meditating, really. And he was in the distance, and they weren't filming yet, but he was just sort of getting into character. And I realise now what an aura he kind of extended over the whole proceedings. It was lovely, it was gentle, there were sort of buzzing flies and birds around, as there were those days, 40 years ago. But that was beautiful. But also last night, my husband and I watched The Six Napoleons. And you probably all know that there's a wonderful moment towards the end of it where Lestrade comes up to Sherlock Holmes, and Holmes is expecting some reprimand or barb or something. And Lestrade says, there isn't a man down at the station who wouldn't be proud to shake your hand. And Jeremy's face after that moment is giving me goosebumps just to talk about it, because everything is shown on the face, not too much. And he doesn't say anything, but he's obviously incredibly moved, but can't quite believe it, and then goes off to play the violin. But it's just the most wonderful moment, and unique so far in what we've seen. And I just thought, that's the man and that's the actor.
Yeah. Betsy?
We were in Leighton Hall for most of the shoot, and there are two things, very, very short things. One is that I was very aware that Jeremy was essentially teaching us how you go on location, that you have deep respect for the people whose home you're in, and you create a relationship, and thanks to that, and thanks to you guys, I had lost touch with Susie Reynolds. When I was working in London in theatre, I would go up and spend weekends there. Richard Reynolds, her husband, God rest his soul, his mother used to open the house during the war and have soldiers come up and all the theatrical people to entertain them in the house. So he tried to keep on that tradition, and the door was always open. And so they were a huge boon to me. And then all these years later, after this whole of the exposure to the podcast, Susie and I have been in touch, and we're going to be visiting each other, and it's just been glorious. And that's a lot thanks to you guys for supporting you guys, for supporting us.
Yeah.
And Jeremy, thank you.
Well, those first 13 episodes are what started it all, because had you guys not completely knocked it out of the stratosphere with your performances and with the stories you told, the show wouldn't have gone on to what it did. And we got 10 years of the best Sherlock Holmes ever. So thank you all for being here, and thank you for your work. Thank you so much.